Hey everyone, I'm Josh. Hope you're enjoying it. If you have a CTO or are a CTO and you did not submit a paper, please keep an eye out. We need more every year. It's great to have people come from overseas, but it's also great to have local people come together and convene and help each other out through this interesting role. Whilst some of us might have been a has-been, maybe I was a never was. So today we're going to do a panel. It's we've prepared a few sort of overarching themes for the topics to have a chat about, and I'll definitely ask for extra suggestions from you. It might be based on things you've heard about today already, or other things that have been burning inside you that you'd like to hear from other people about. But we do have an interesting collection here today. Dave was on the panel in Brisbane, but anyway, I'll let you all introduce yourselves. Don't need me to.
So I'm Dave Coombes. I am the CTO at Tyro. We are a technology company that provides payments and banking services predominantly to small.
I don't think it's on, Dave.
Yes, what? Try this one.
Okay. So my name is Dave Coombes. I am the CTO at Tyro. We're a technology company that provides payments and banking services predominantly to small businesses. So if you've ever gone to pay with something with your credit card and had to do it on the side, that's us. So that's where we are. So I've been there for about 2.5 years. We're about 480 people in total, of which just under 200 are technologists.
I'm Kat, and I'm not a CTO. Were you expecting more?
I think so.
I'm an engineering manager at Ticketmaster, and I come from a background of highly regulated crap.
I can see you love your job. You all heard what I do.
job.
I don't need to do it again.
No. All right. So I'll just do a quick synopsis of some of the overarching themes, and then we'll dive into them. So one of the topics that was suggested was the overlap between the product group and the engineering group. Should there be one? Should there be a split? Yes or no? Do we need architects? Should the CTO be a geek? The pendulum swing between technology and sociology that a CTO seems to have to focus on, and ethics in technology and CTO dark patterns, which is a fun one. So let's start with one of them. Do we need architects?
Architects think we need architects.
Software architects, system architects, enterprise architects, solution architects.
I think it depends on how your company is built, and it depends on whether you've got people who are willing to step into that role and who understand what it really means, that it is not just somewhere that you put the senior person who doesn't play well with others. Oh, come on. Yes, I know you're laughing. You know that's often where you put your architects and why you put them over there. Go into a corner, in a dark corner, and come up with a thing, and hopefully it'll be great.
What does it really mean then?
What you're really, I think, asking me is what does a good architect look like?
Yeah.
Yeah? You have a go. Yeah, have a mic.
Well, we have architects, so obviously I'm somewhat biased. But I think it is very contextual, and I think it's where you are as an organisation and also where you want to go. So I spent a long time in a role that had architect in the title, and I consulted as an architect, and I ran architecture teams. And a lot of times, especially when I was talking to the teams I was running, I would often say, if we never added another feature or if we never onboarded another customer, I would fire all of the architects. And that's a very contentious kind of position to take, especially if you're running a team of architects. But to my mind, the role of the architect is predominantly around change. So people spend a long time documenting current state. They think about where they are. I don't actually think that that's useful. I think what's really useful is where does your business want to go? And the technology decisions you have to make to take you on that journey, are you making them in an informed way? And so the reason we needed architects at Tyro, I think we needed architects, and I think that's now being kind of played out, is Tyro started as a payments company, and effectively in the credit card world, there's two things you can do. You take a transaction and then you settle that transaction. And there's a very nice domain split in there, and there's a temporal split between them. So we had two teams, and one was run by a guy called Matt, and one was run by a guy called Jeff, and it was Team Matt and Team Jeff. And everyone knew where they sat, in which side here. And that worked fine for ages, and they were really effective delivery teams. We don't need no stinking architects. And then we took that model and we cookie cutted out another 18 delivery teams, all with that same view of like, we're going to, make our own autonomous decisions. We're going to have collective code ownership, but we don't have 18 distinct products. And what we found was it was the overlap and the assumptions that people were making around what other teams did that was really starting to slow us down and have a detrimental impact. So we actually grew our architects from like internally. So we've taken some of our most tenured and I would say respected engineers and put them in a position where they're able to have more influence and impact. We call them architect because they help inform the architecture decisions, but they are in the trenches every day with the people, writing the code. They are deeply technical. They are deeply respected at the company, I would say. And I think it's really, that may change over time. We may get to a point where those teams become more self-supporting or there's more diversity among them. But at the moment, just having a few people who are thinking about those larger scale decisions, thinking about the impact of those larger scale decisions is actually having a very positive impact. And it's a small number of people who are able to positively influence a much larger engineering team.
How do you stop your architects going off into a corner and going, I've got this great idea and I'm going to write code?
We don't let them sit in the corner. we make them sit with the people who are working on the code all day, every day. They sit.
Can you guys hear? Should I just give me the mic back?
We're a vaguely Spotify-esque kind of model. So we have tribes, and those tribes are aligned around lines of business, and the architects sit with that line of business, and they sit with the engineers who work there day to day, and they are facilitators, they are enablers, and my kind of view is like, I don't care who makes the decisions in a team. I want to make sure that decisions are being made. I want to make sure that those decisions are being made in an informed way that takes into account, risk and cost and the skills we have available and the business goals we want to achieve. So we don't let them sit in the corner. It's quite easy.
It's okay if they're writing code. Kat, you got anything to add?
I think it's a dumb question. Of course, we need architects.
Well, there's a lot of teams where there isn't people with that title, but the role is being played.
Yeah,
obviously.
so I suppose I should say that we definitely need architecture, whether or not we need architects.
I think just riffing off what Dave was saying about change and the lack of. I was the first architect employed at Atlassian, and that was specifically to completely upheave the entire organisation, the way the product was built, deployed, marketed, everything. So it was people were doing architecture before that, obviously, but the specificity of what I was doing probably came with this extra acknowledgement that there's a massive change coming, and everything you now know is going to be different. Cool. And who here does not have architects in their team with that title? Yeah, even Gills doesn't, right? But people are doing architecture. I think it was Martin Fowles talks about it like, he reiterates other people talking about it like it's all the hard decisions, the ones that are hard to change, and that as time goes by, make fundamental shifts in how the product's put together. Cool. And maybe sort of coming along from that, and it was great to hear both Gil and Dave talk about this morning about CTOs and their level of technological competency, currency, capability, credibility. Should a CTO be a geek?
I have a CTO, so I feel qualified to answer. I think it's so important to have someone where you can respect their ability to detect weak signals right? So I guess to the extent that you need to have seen a lot of things, that's really important, but it might not be that important to be up to date on like every little thing and contributing code all the time. But for me, it's very valuable to have a CTO who has been exposed to enough different situations where they can detect weak signals that I might not be able to. So it's really important to have an experienced geek for a CTO.
To me, it's about domain knowledge. Like if you're leading a team of people who are in a financial industry or doing outdoor education experiences, then you want people who are, at that leadership level to understand the domain you're operating in. And when you're, running a team of engineers, then you want your leader to have those geeky qualities, if only because it'll help ensure that they're having fun and they'll stay doing what they want to do. It's if you put it this way, if you have someone who's not a geek, who doesn't understand what's going on from a technical perspective in their team, then they've probably outsourced that knowledge to someone else. And you can do that in some kind of companies where maybe, like our particular company, everybody's technical. Everybody is technical, except for our support team, and then we make them technical when we onboard them. So you could have potentially a less technical CTO because everybody there has that technical expertise. But, if you've got a large, like if you're working for NAB or something like that, and you've got very strong other areas of the business and your CTO is responsible for technology, then chances are that they got to have that technical knowledge in order to succeed and represent the technical area of the organisation to the rest of the leadership team with competency.
Yeah, I would strongly agree with that point. So I thought it was interesting this morning when Gil was talking about the different organisational structures and where CTOs sit, whether they're a coach, whether they're, line manager. So at Tyra at the moment, engineering very squarely sits below me. So there's just under 200 people within that engineering line. And I take very seriously the responsibility that I represent them at the wider exec level. So if I don't have the empathy or, the care or the interest or the passion of the things that they care about and they're passionate about, I will do a very poor job of representing their interests and what they care about. Conversely, I also have to have a bit more empathy maybe with my peers who've got other challenges, and so I also represent that back into our engineering function. But, I spent 20 odd years kind of working in technology, and I wouldn't have done it that long if I didn't, if that wasn't the thing that excited me. The fact that, a lot of my job is around, management and budgets and cost and risk and all that, but predominantly it's about creating an environment that, fosters people who care about engineering, who care about quality, who care about using software to enable things for our customers. And I think you've got to have, somewhere deep down in you, you've got to really still care about technology to actually represent those people empathetically.
Turns out that maybe wasn't so contentious after all.
No, it is, because I think that if you're going to be credible, you need to keep up to date, have that learning mindset, be able to work with. Maybe Dave and Gil and I have a similar opinion that we don't necessarily want to be line managers or dealing with human resource issues every day. We want to deal with the job that we're there for. And picking up, like, who has learnt a language in the last year? Learnt a new language, right? Not anywhere near enough of the people, right? So it's not doing it for the sake of doing it. It's doing it to be continuing to keep up to date. And yes, the empathy is most easily manifested when you are doing the same thing as well. I still contribute code. I think it's a good thing. Sometimes it's lead by example. I don't just say TDD. I show them how to do it really well because I want them to do it really well. And to your point, Nicola, about the somebody that might be less capable in that role, as long as they're in a organisation where autonomous decisions are being made, that's fine. But I think we've all been in companies where somebody who has a level of influence and directorial power makes really bad technical decisions because somebody from a vendor has convinced them that that's the right thing to do, or it's just what they've brought with them from somewhere that they've done in the past, and that's all they're comfortable with. And that's neither of those are great reasons to make technological decisions, and you're better off just leaving it to the people who have to deal with the consequence.
I think when you've got a technical person, in that CTO function, it enables faster decision making, because you're not having to kind of go, I've taken your input, now I have to go back to my experts and get that feedback, and then I'll come back to you, and then we'll have a bit of a discussion and figure out what the best way forward is. At that point, you're adding friction, not taking it away, and that's not really what we're there for.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm curious about is, when are other C-level roles, like I keep hearing CEOs and presidents and all of this stuff say, we're a technology company first and all of these things, but they're not geeks, right? So what I'm curious about is, when are we going to see other C-level executives have a geeky background, if they're really technology companies?
I think a lot of technology companies do have those, but
I'm talking about companies that haven't
anymore.
Historically been technology companies, right? They're not whatever.
Are you asking for diversity at the executive level?
Shoot, I guess I am.
And also, I would suggest that the companies that are saying that it's a marketing ploy, and they're not really technology.
Digital transformation.
Yeah, digital transformation. And Dave, at one point you mentioned talking to your peers a lot, and one of our discussions down here, something I mentioned was that even if I'm not in a technology company, as a CTO, at least half of my role is business strategy and working with the other executives at what the business is doing, so working on the business, and then the other half is in working with the teams.
Yeah, I mean, for a company like ours, staff cost is our largest cost, and engineering is our largest department. So I am actually responsible for making sure that that money that comes from our investors is optimally spent. And I need to be able to look my boss in the eye and say that I can confidently say that, with the best of my judgment, we are spending that money as optimally as we can on software that delivers the most value for our customers. And I take that responsibility incredibly seriously. And I think that the ability to have, to be able to empathize with the other areas of the business, and then really talk about what technology excels at, which is really looking at problems, breaking them down, thinking about smart ways. And I think that the conversation this morning around doing more with less, using the technologies that are available, absolutely in the service of our customers. I think that's a big part of that job. And I think, building that relationships with your exec peers and building that trust with them is, in some ways, the hardest part of the job. I've got an amazing team of very, very smart people. I think a really good, I think an important part as you go through that technical leadership journey is understanding which decisions you actually need to abdicate yourself from. I can't be telling them about, this language or that language, or tabs versus spaces, or whatever the kind of, discussion of the day, it's spaces, whatever the discussion of the day is. But, I can sit there and I can ask, I think, smart, informed questions around, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? What if this company goes out of business that we're backing the house on? What if APRA comes along and sort of challenges you on this thing? So I'm really there to help ask the questions. That means that I can then speak to my boss and be absolutely confident that we're doing everything we can to use that investment in the best service of our customers.
I think having that good relationship at that peer level is good as a signal to the team in working in cross-functional teams. Often, if I go into a company that's desperate enough to hire me, there's a lot of toxicity between, say, the software development team and other parts of the organisation they have to work with, and I will visibly collaborate with the heads of those areas so that our teams can see us vociferously working together and overcoming the challenges and coming up with an agreement, so that they know, one, it's a consensus, but secondarily they can work together with their peers in other parts of the organisation too, and remove that toxicity.
So I sit next to our Chief Product Officer, and that's absolutely by design. And we are generally aligned on most things, and that's because she's the first person I see in the morning, she's the last person I see at night. Wow. At work.
In the office.
At work. And we spend a lot of time, nearly all of our conversations around getting alignment, understanding the challenges that we have, making sure that when we talk to our teams, we are giving a fairly united front. And on the odd occasion when we've had, a sort of a disagreement about something in a meeting, and it's generally because it's something that's come up that we've not previously discussed. And I've had people go, it's like watching your mum and dad argue. Like you didn't really kind of realise that they row now and again. I go, of course we do. We have a very healthy kind of, there's the right healthy tension between product and engineering there. But, the message I think that sends, the fact that, they see us together all the time. We spend a lot of time together. We're in a lot of meetings together. We go to every stand-up together. We go to every showcase together. I think sends a very strong message that, the product and engineering are absolutely, kind of a partnership that's very hard to break up at Tara.
All right. Question for the audience. Yes, Dave?
I just want to come back to the comment of the CTO, who also runs engineering. My experience is that the level of innovation that happens in those companies is less because the job naturally gets dominated by the bottom line decision.
I can only speak for our company. I don't think that's the case. I mean, I'm very lucky that we've got a very strong leadership team. I've got a very strong leadership team. We've also got some very strong engineers who've been around a long time. They will constantly challenge and push. And so a lot of the innovation comes kind of from the bottom up. I kind of get a bit concerned at those companies where you go, innovation happens over here and then it kind of gets brought into the fold. I think, we try and I would
Good. All right. Okay, question for the audience. Who knows what Myers-Briggs is? And is it employed in some way in the recruitment side of your organization? Thank God for that. Because even the quacks think that's crazy, right? So one of my contentions was that the amount of sociological themes that we need to deal with, including things like Myers-Briggs, overwhelm the technological aspects of our expertise, and that I said more CTOs these days need to know about Myers-Briggs than Curry-Howard correspondence. So thoughts about that, and is the pendulum swinging one way or another? Is there a pendulum? Is it just a harmony that needs to be established?
I spoke to a friend of mine, and his opinion was that as a CTO, his number one job was hiring, because it was setting the culture for the rest of the company, and it was setting the direction, and it was making sure that it was bringing the right kind of innovation in. And he had previously very explicitly turned away from any kind of recruitment firms because he found that often people would come through to him direct who had previously been knocked back, and he hadn't heard from them through a recruitment firm because they had failed some sort of screening test by people who didn't know what they were doing. And they were like, well, we get all these thousands of resumes, and what do we do with them? How do we figure out which firm they should go to? Well, we kind of profiled the company and decided that this company wants an MBTI kind of measure of this, whatever it is, that looks like this. And we screen all these recruitment agencies, screen the applicants. So for me, the question is, people tend to use these sort of tools because they maybe don't really know what they're looking for. And, it's most often seen in a recruitment agency. So, whether you're using Myers-Briggs or some other measurement tool, it's usually because you're actually not really sure what you're looking for. And once you know what you're looking for, then it makes it a lot easier to go out and find it. That said, I have seen other similar profiling tools used to help generate conversation between, where you've got like conflict and lack of trust, putting a framework around something, even if it's 90% bullshit, enables you to, at least sit there and say, well, you got this score and you're more aggressive and you're more compromising, then, you know, so how does that mean that we should, you know, that gives you a framework to have a conversation around maybe how you can have more productive conversations that are healthy tension rather than sort of destructive conflict. So for me, it's down to two things. Like I would, you know, Myers-Briggs is rubbish. And I will laugh at any recruitment firm that says we do sociological profiling on our applicants. I'm like, that's not what I'm looking for. I want you to actually understand my needs and find people who are going to meet my needs. So yes, for me, it's two things. It's, do you understand what you're actually looking for? Why are you trying to use this tool? And then find a tool that solves whatever it is that you're actually trying to solve, whether that is conflict or recruitment or... But I wouldn't build a team around trying to find people who met a certain kind of personality type as such.
I'm going to choose to ignore the Myers-Briggs portion of your question because it is just horrible. 90% was really generous of you, in my opinion. But I think fundamentally we are engaging in and creating socio-technical systems, right? And it is impossible for us to separate the socio and the technical. They are one. They are socio-technical systems. And I'm encouraged by some of the things that I see, like DevOps, I think, is a socio-technical movement. I also am really encouraged by some sessions at like developer conferences I've started to see that are talking about social practice theory, right? That we're engaging in these socio-technical systems. We're acting on them, they're acting on us, all of these things, but you can't separate it. You just can't. But what has happened, and Dave and I were talking earlier, I don't know why it's happened. I don't know if there's just money in it or I have no idea, but the research and the tools that came out of the original movement where they coined the term socio-technical systems, those have basically all been co-opted by HR folks, right? Like Alan's talk earlier where he talked about the temporal collapse, right? That our right now is getting smaller and smaller, and it becomes really difficult to plan for horizons like 5 or 10 years, right? That's not actually that long, but it's impossible for us to plan for it because of that temporal collapse. Well, there's a huge body of existing research on that came out of the socio-technical systems movement, but now the institutes that are like the shepherds of that research have just been taken over by HR people. And to me, it's really sad, right? That we are losing access to that part of our history, right? It's basically being forgotten, and it's horrible. Like, are we going to rediscover this, that they are socio-technical systems? I hope so, but I just don't really know at this point. I hope you have something more positive to say.
I think so. Well, we'll see. I mean, because of the way we're structured, so as I said, there's about 200 people sort of in my team, and I didn't train as a computer scientist, so I actually trained as a theoretical physicist, but I've long since forgotten nearly everything about physics other than heat rises. So most of what comes to me is bad news or escalation or this thing didn't work or this thing's too expensive or this company we're going to work with is now going out of business, or all these kind of things. So, and you hear the good things too, but I have to go and pull for those, it turns out. So, and again, 90% of these, well, more than 90% of them do not have a root in technology. They have a root in people. So people have got, desires and strengths and egos and fears and all of the things that influence the decisions you make on a day-to-day basis, especially if you imagine all the different interactions you have within a relatively large engineering team. They're all people issues. They're very rarely technology issues, and certainly at my level I don't get very rarely does someone come and ask me my opinion about the technology. They come and ask my opinion about how we can move forward with a bunch of teams who are enabling technology for our customers. So whether I like it or not, there's a very large, I love that term, socio-technical, because I think that absolutely captures, you know, how it is. They are technical people, but they're engaged in a social activity, and software development is absolutely a social activity where you're bringing together smart people to deliver something much better than any of them could done individually. So I kind of can't help feel it's just part of the job now, and I think that, you know, the pendulum may have swung a bit too far, and there's probably a whole bunch of reasons for that, but I think you know, as soon as you start to forget about, you know, the people aspect and the culture aspect, then the technology will never save you from that.
I agree with you, or I think I agree with your sentiment, right? That they are people problems and the fact that it's a social exercise to develop software, but I don't love it, and you can tell me to get lost because I'm not a CTO. I don't love it when people say that ultimately they are people problems, because I just don't think it's possible to separate that. And then what I find, me being me, when someone says, oh, they're just people problems, or DevOps is a mindset, or I hear all of these things, I'm like, I don't understand what that means. But then I run into executives who are like, and we're just going to have an offsite, and we're going to go there, and we're just going to change our minds, and we're going to go back and be DevOps. Meanwhile, you still have existing processes, existing tools, all of this existing code, right, that is not DevOps. It was not created in that manner, and just because you changed your mind about that, there's still so much inertia, right? The organization is headed in a certain direction, and just because you changed your mind about it doesn't mean that suddenly the whole trajectory of the organization is going to change, right? Like, I do really like what social practice theory has to say, right? Where there's a meaning to the activities, there's competence, there's skill, right? And so you have to develop the skill, and then there's the actual material of the practice, which is the tools or the code or whatever the case may be when it's made material. And in order to change, you have to change all of those things. You can't just address one, because then you get like the rubber band effect where it like snaps back in a very unpleasant manner. I don't know. That was just like a random rant. I don't even know what's happening. Dude, that is exactly it. Yeah, but everyone's like, okay, I'm in the DevOps state of mind. I'm like, what is happening here?
Yeah, so it's about halfway through, so it's probably time for some audience participation. So there's a couple of questions, and let's go for it.
It was mentioned in the morning session that, you know, if you don't believe that you can solve the problem, you're never going to get close to it. So I would challenge what you said. Yeah. Yes, it's not enough to change your mindset, but I think you need to start there.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I totally agree, right? That we have to, so this, I'm going to go back because I have a microphone and so I feel like I have this power, but I'll go back to that temporal collapse, right? If we, again, I think what you're saying is the same thing. If we give people a very small space in which to play, whether it's a very small present, a very small right now, or whatever the case may be, right? If you have a small mindset, then you are artificially constraining what is possible for those folks. So I'll go back to Alan's talk because I liked it very much. But I think that exercises like Alan described, or like idealized design, right? Akoff, he went into these companies that are basically attempting these giant technology shifts and says, how can we mentally remove all of those constraints and then slowly build them back in as we validate that they are for real, right? But yeah, I think you certainly have to give people, some constraints are enabling, but other constraints are just shitty. One clap on that, yeah!
I mean, change management is hard. Like, I mean, yes, it's a people problem, but, you know, unless you get the processes to come along to, then people are like, the friction is really big. So, you know, yes, you have to start with the people. Unless they have buy-in, they're never going to get through that friction period until you get to your end state. So it's, you know, it's about building in that culture change and recognising that what you're doing is a culture change and not just, you know, we're just going to think a little bit different and use some different words to describe exactly the same thing that we've always done.
Agile.
Next question.
Any questions from the audience or any, I don't know, comments slash retorts?
We need a DevOps architect.
Thanks, Gil. You're it.
There's been a lot of talk previously about how fast technology is changing. I get the impression it's not accelerating as much as it used to, but maybe I'm wrong. What are your views on, is technology change continue to accelerate?
I think the one thing that is changing a lot, and I think just the and it's not even, there's so much to learn these days. I think it's finding what's the point that you engage and you build on top of. So Tyro started in 2003, and it had a very strong mantra of building everything. Like, we built our own switch, we built our own terminal, we built our own logging framework, we built everything, because that's how you did things kind of back then. And we'd have built our own operating system if we kind of thought about it. And if you think now, to stay competitive, there are so many services out there. There are so many things that used to be, niche or differentiating that are now commoditized. And I think, and the kind of surface area of all of those things is changing so much. So, AWS reInvent is the sound of 1,000 startups dying when, Amazon kind of chooses the one that they anoint as, either they've purchased them or they've onboarded a service which now makes all these kind of other things obsolete. And I think that the challenge that we have is where do you engage? Like, at what point are you going to run your own Kubernetes cluster? Are you going to do this? Are you going to build your own auth? And where do you engage with that bit? Because those decisions are hard to undo. I think, once you kind of hitch your horse to a particular SaaS framework or a particular, kind of cloud service. So I think it's not so much the pace of change. I think it's the surface area of things that you now need to choose between. And some of those decisions are just needs to be good enough. Some of these things will actually, maybe make your business, kind of succeed or fail. So that's the bit that's the bit that, if you talk about the things that keep me awake at night, it's those kind of decisions. And are we choosing, kind of judiciously from all the things that's available to us?
For me, it's about what you're choosing to measure. Technology is everywhere, and I think people's access to technology is becoming more and more ubiquitous. My kids have got access to technology that I couldn't even dream of when I was a kid, much less when even I was an adult. I go overseas, or my husband goes overseas, and I'm camping in the Grampians, and my kids think nothing of ringing him up on my phone over 4G and having a FaceTime chat where all they're doing is pulling faces at him. When my dad went overseas, you got 1 minute on a Friday, and even then you only got 30 seconds because, mum had to talk to dad when he was away, and if we missed our window, it didn't even happen. So people at all ages now have got access to technology that they previously didn't. So, is the technology itself increasing? Is people's access to it changing? Is their understanding of it changing? Is our ability to legislate around it changing? Yes. So, when I think about what we would have thought of the rate of change 20 years ago would have been looking at what technologies can we do? What does the hardware do? What sort of software capabilities have we got? And I think, that's just exploded. But if you look at some of the other aspects of the environment that we're operating in, I think that's producing a much bigger impact in terms of what we do. It's, what are our customers expecting? What are the next generation of customers expecting, given that they've grown up with the power of the internet in their pocket? I cannot tell you how many times my kids have asked me for an iPhone, and they're still in primary school. And what's happening with personal data are the things that people currently take for granted that are free, and they've suddenly discovered that it wasn't really free all along, and they're calling upon governments to help them get their data protected. I think that there is going to be a huge turn in terms of where technology is used by government and law enforcement, and how people want to use it to defend against law enforcement and government. You think about what drones are capable of doing these days, and if you get a guerrilla army who's going to be using drones to do stuff against a government that they don't agree with, our technology is going in places that maybe we're not really thinking about just yet. I don't know where that was going.
I have a lot of feelings about this one and just about things in general, but I think it depends on your vantage point, right? So now we have compute is being commodified, right? And many of us use Amazon or whatever the case may be. So I think that, though, is just like you said, enabling higher order innovation, because we can begin to take certain things for granted. We don't have to like invest our brain power in that, right? What I am really interested in is, like, we describe all of these things from the point of view of the developed world, and I'm really interested in, like, we take certain elements of our technology infrastructure for granted, and in other parts of the world, there's like a fundamentally different approach, given, I think, a set of enabling constraints. He's not even paying attention to me anymore. But I think, so for me, how many of you work in banking or financial services or something of that nature? Yeah, a good number, right? I'm really interested in like M-Pesa and how that is a fundamentally different approach to transacting. And I'm just curious about those things. Like, is it good that we in the developed world are now taking certain elements of our technology infrastructure for granted? That could be good because it's enabling higher order innovation, or it could be bad because it leaves us exposed to basically the threat of technology innovations in the developing world, where they're dealing with a different set of constraints, right? So is our commodified technology infrastructure an enabler, or is it like a huge blind spot? I have no idea. So I don't think that uniformly across the globe that the pace of change in technology is the same.
I think going back to the early 90s, there was a guy out of DEC, Jeff Harrow, that did this weekly podcast, before there were podcasts, about the rapidly changing face of computing. And that was like a fire hose. I think he gave up in the early 2000s because it's just like too much stuff. You can't even fathom the amount. But I'm sure people that have been in the industry longer than I might say that whilst there are these large step changes, we seem to be spinning wheels a lot, and there feels like a lot of innovation, but we're just doing the same stupid things, or not learning from what happened maybe before 30 years ago. Dave, would you say that? Alan? Yeah. Rebecca? But by the same token, I think there are things that we take for granted now that 30 years ago would have been unthinkable, and the same thing's absolutely going to happen in another 30 years that we just don't even conceive of it now. So
yeah, our industry is so young, I feel like, right? Like the Industrial Revolution hasn't even happened everywhere yet, and we have people who are like, oh, this is the computing era, and I'm like, really? Is that where we're at? And I'll do my rant about babies. How do you measure the age of a baby? It's not a trick question.
Don't cut it open and count the rings. I can say that. I've got 2 children.
Weeks or months, right? That's how you measure the age of a baby. But you, an adult human, I assume that you measure your age in years, yes? But when I hear people say things like, oh, this is legacy, it's 5 years old, I'm like, that is a signal to me that we are still babies, that we haven't learned to deal with, like, we're still measuring in this very tiny unit of time. And so that indicates to me that we're babies.
Any other questions over here in the middle? Come on. All right, the outliers have it.
Sorry, I don't mean to jump in too much, but it's a really good question. I'm glad you brought up the video communication example, right? It may feel like we're babies in this country and many countries like ours, but if you look at the impact it's having on I hate the phrase developing world, but if you look at those countries and the impact it's having, like for them it's more than a step change. It's like multiple steps, right? So I grew up in India. We didn't even have a telephone in the house, let alone a TV. We were just like, and now my kids are video conferencing with their cousins all over the world, right? And so that's in India as well. certain transitions, right? They didn't have ADSL. They just went to 5G, right? And so they just skipped, like it's, so we think it's incremental here, but then in those countries, like it's a huge.
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about in countries or places, wherever, economies where there is that opportunity to leapfrog. That is really interesting to me because those places have the option, right, to kind of skip over some other points of evolution that now could be inhibiting our ability in the developed world to innovate, right? They can kind of discard, and we've seen the same thing with industrialization across the world, right? Now we're looking at industrialization in Africa with a lot of investment from Asia, and they're able, each round of industrialization has been quicker. It's because we as humans are getting better at industrialization. We know which things we're coming up with a pattern for how to industrialize, right? And I assume the same thing will happen with computing.
Cool. All right. We'll switch gears a bit. Ethics in technology. Do you have to worry about it? Are you ever compromised on your ethics? Are people in your team approaching you with their issues about compromising their ethics with work that you're doing? Maybe you work for a sort of company in a sector that is well known for not having very good ethics and social responsibility. Maybe you have people that champion it within your organisation, but it's not something that everybody thinks is part of what they have to think about.
Where's the table that talked about, are we paying lip service to diversity? I kind of feel like if you have people that are coming to you and talking about their ethical dilemmas through the course of your work, that's way better than most places I've been.
Who put this topic in? Because, you know, I've given talks about ethics in technology, and it's a particular hobby horse of mine, and it happens to be the company I work for as well. And we did a big values exercise and figured out, you know, why would people come and pay us, Fastmail, a small company, a small Australian company, when, you know, you could be with Google or Microsoft for your email? Like, what makes people decide that they want to come to Fastmail? And it was because they valued our values, and our values are around, you know, being trustworthy and being an ethical company. And since we've been able to articulate that as an internal value, I have seen morale and productivity improve in our company 1,000-fold. Previously, it was a nice place to work. We enjoyed what we did. We thought our technology was cool. We believed that what we had was a superior product. But since sitting there and saying, Google have explicitly thrown away, you know, do no evil, and Fastmail have sat there and said, no, we believe that you are our customer and that, you know, your data is yours and we are just custodians of it, and we provide a service and you pay us for that service. We're not monetizing you in any other way. We don't have any other ulterior motive. We don't even have an additional business that we're running on the side that maybe we're using your data to help power some intelligence over there. Everybody has brought on board their vision. And I hear stories every week of someone or other else who's, you know, met someone on the street and started talking about what they do for a job, and now we've ended up with one more customer because we've been, you know, even every single employee is excited about what we do. People leave companies because the company's ethical stance is at odds with their own. You know, you might stick around because the people you work with are great or you're learning great technology, but eventually it crushes your will to live if your personal ethics are being compromised. At least I hope it does. And if it doesn't crush your will to live, if your personal ethics are being compromised, then maybe you don't have, you know, that strong sense of personal ethics. I don't know.
Some of us have enough privilege to be able to take that stance. Like, I'm male, white, tall, English speaking, handsome.
Modest.
Like, modesty is one of my best attributes. I attribute all my greatness to my modesty.
But I'm pretty sure that everybody in this room shares a fair bit of financial privilege as well.
In our role, it's I feel it's our responsibility to care for the people in our teams that maybe don't have that privilege, and give them the safety to be able to object to an ethical stance by the organisation, especially when it's maybe a surprise. I know Dave has a pattern for dealing with this. So, yeah, Dave.
I mean, I will say, the only things I've ever deeply regretted in my career is when I've not stood up and said something about something that I didn't agree with. And I ended up leaving a company because of a company that they chose to do business with, and my biggest regret was that I didn't call it out earlier, because I maybe could have influenced that decision. And I think I'd agree that really a company's values effectively codifies the ethics by which that company stands. And I think that as leaders and as a leadership team, if we are seen to be making decisions which are in any way not aligned with those values, we absolutely should be held to account. And that's, you know, what I expect of all of my teams. And we have had instances recently where we've had the opportunity to do work which I know is going to actually be against someone's particular stance on something, you know, a socio-economic policy or something. And we've actually put surveys out to gauge people's views on whether we should or shouldn't do something. Sometimes people are like, that's a management decision, do your job, make a call. But some people feel very strongly about these things. And there's been instances where we've had the opportunity to do some work, and either we've chosen not to do it because of that view, or we've absolutely said, if you feel strongly that this is something which doesn't sit with your ethics, we would absolutely not ask you to work on that. Interestingly, you know, as a somewhat left-leaning Guardian reader, I presume that everybody has my mindset, and it's interesting when you kind of canvass a company. Interestingly, they're drawn from all parts of, you know, the kind of you know, social spectrum. So I think it's interesting when you gauge people's views, especially on something which is maybe a little bit contentious. But I know that, you know, I think that's the least we can do, is to give people in our companies the opportunity to kind of vent their concerns or raise their concerns around decisions that are being made, and absolutely ask, are those decisions being made in line with our published company values? Because if they're not, then those values are worthless.
I don't think that we always have the resources, personally, to understand when decisions could be at odds with our values. Like the hiring algorithm that ended up selecting people named Steve who play lacrosse or whatever, right? Like, I don't think anyone went into that and was like, oh, this is highly unethical, we shouldn't do this, right? But if you don't have people on the teams with a diverse set of experiences, then I think you just leave yourself open to those types of mistakes. Or Tay is another one that I just love, because you're like, were there any women in the room on that one? Like, who didn't know that Twitter is a cesspool, right?
Well, the Apple credit card.
The Apple credit card, yeah, that's been in the news and all over Twitter lately. But so I think I love the idea of inviting conversation, and it sounds like you have different methods of doing that, so people, even folks who might not feel comfortable speaking up in front of the group, still have an avenue to do that. So I think that's really cool. But for me, I just try to remember that I have blind spots. I know that I do, because I don't have the same experience as everyone else, and I don't necessarily have the resources to actually recognize something as being at odds with my espoused values.
I think there's a bit from Radical Candor, I think it's Tim Cook, but I might be wrong. But I think it's Tim Cook saying that leadership is about giving a voice to the quiet people. And I strongly believe that. And I think if you just only listen to the people who are, you know, the loudest voices in your company, you'll get an echo chamber. Often you'll just get, you know, the kind of, you know, those kind of strong held opinions. I think it's all our accountability to make sure that every person in the company, you at least have a feeling for what motivates them, for what they care about. And, you know, we spend a lot of time in our teams, you know, one-on-ones with people, skip level meetings, team level meetings, and it's really just about building that rapport and trust, so that, you know, in the odd occasion when this very contentious things come up, they feel like they've got the opportunity to come and raise it, whether you come and speak to me or they speak to their manager, or we've got an internal thing where people can post anonymously and ask any question, and we guarantee that question gets answered at the next town hall.
So the thing about ethics, right, and particularly if you've got something that's a conflict, it's a very hard discussion to have with someone, because it often will go right to the core of who you are as a person. And calling into value someone based on disagreeing because of an ethical position, it requires great vulnerability to be able to say, I firmly believe in this. It goes to the heart of who I am, and I disagree with you on it. So I've been giving a talk about how we do better practical ethics. Come and see me at LCA. And in it, I talk about how we've only begun as a baby kind of arena to think about, what are we doing with the data? What are our responsibilities to our consumers, to, the legal entities that, are starting to legislate on us? Internally, how do we behave towards one another? Externally, how do we behave as a product? And living an ethical life, it turns out, we all think that we've got this code of ethics. You all think that you live an ethical life. Nobody here, hopefully, thinks that they live an unethical life. But it turns out, and you find this out very quickly when you have kids, that who you think you are is not really who you are. There's this gap because we get lazy and because things are hard. So for an example, nobody wants our wildlife to die. Littering is wrong. I do not litter. But when I pass a piece of litter on the street, I don't stop and pick it up and put it in the bin. That's really easy. I wish to be paid for my expertise. You wish to be paid well in response to your expertise. Living in Australia, I don't get TV shows when they're released. You can see where I'm going with this, can't you? So, you think about ways that you live ethically, and you think about how you put those values into practice. And my advice to everybody, and you don't have to come and see me at LCA, start small. Start thinking about the things that are important to you. Are you concerned about the rate at which we're burning up the planet? Is Bitcoin bad? Should your product therefore take payments in Bitcoin? That's a big thing. That's a big conversation to have with your customers. It's a big conversation to have internally. So you start small and you sit there and say, do I believe about littering? What am I going to do with littering? Am I going to start paying for movies and wait for the TV shows, or pay for some streaming service so I can get it when it's become available instead of torrenting it? Am I going to pay for books on the internet? Am I going to be, paying for that free software instead of getting the ad-supported version, or, using it against their terms and conditions? Do you have members of your team that have maybe got, screenshot software that they're using the free version even though they're using it in a commercial place? So start small. Start encouraging people in your team and as a leadership of living that ethical life with the small decisions, and have those tough conversations so that when it really matters, you've got experience in how to have those tough conversations at the big level where it's actually going to make an impact.
So some of us work for startups or high growth companies so there was a comment from one of the tables about data provenance and care of data, and particularly personal information. And
that was me.
And visibility, that was your table, yes, right. And so there's a tension there between the growth hacking activities and use of data, even if it's internally. And given I'm here representing a company that's all about writing more secure code, it's very easy to screw that up. So with all this acquisition of data that should be cared for, and then very lax attitudes about how to handle it, and in the, with neo-fascism taking over and people getting called out, if you stand up and say something about this, then you're sort of put upon and made to feel like you're not a team player, or you're not espousing the company values. It's an interesting dichotomy, or is it?
So there's, you should come to my talk. So there's different ways that you can tackle this, and if you're talking about a company where you're afraid to stick your head over the parapets for fear that someone's going to shoot you in the head, you need friends so that all of you and your bunny friends can take down the Goliath. And you can often find friends who feel the same way in other areas of your business. And I would actually say, go and talk to your marketing people, because you know what consumers hate? They hate their data being used in the wrong way. It has a really bad effect on the bottom line when that gets out. So you will actually, you know, weirdly, while a lot of us in technology rag on sales and marketing as, you know, they don't know what they're selling or they overpromise or, you know, all the rest of it, if you come and explain the problem to them, you will often find someone who shares what you're worried about. And, you know, when it's more than one of you standing up to say, hi, we've been having a bit of a chat over lunch, or, you know, we've been thinking about this for a little while, maybe we can do better in this area, when there's more than one voice, you can often get a little bit more traction. But yeah, it's still dangerous, and eventually, you know, there are data broker companies out there that are doing unethical things. There are advertising companies out there doing unethical things. At the end, you know, it can come down to a choice between you and the company, and you know, you have the ultimate choice of starving them of your wonderful and beautiful talent and walking away and getting another job, because we are all in this room financially privileged enough and live in a country where we've got healthcare and all that kind of good stuff that enables us to do that. And, you know, that is always an option.
Healthcare must be nice.
I'm so sorry.
All right. Thank you, panelists.